If you were born between 1973 and 1980, then psychologically speaking, you belong to one of the most unique human experiments in modern history, because you grew up in an analog childhood, survived a digital revolution in adulthood, witnessed the rise of the internet, social media, smartphones, economic instability, and cultural fragmentation, all while being expected to adapt silently without demanding attention. And that strange combination may explain why younger Gen X often appears emotionally independent, skeptical of institutions, deeply resilient, but also quietly exhausted in ways most people fail to notice. Younger Gen X grew up in a world that no longer exists. But unlike older generations, they were forced to continuously reinvent themselves to survive a future nobody prepared them for, which created a psychological identity built on adaptability, emotional self-reliance, cynicism toward authority, and an almost invisible emotional burden that rarely gets discussed. And the most fascinating part is that many younger Gen X individuals do not even realize how deeply their personality was shaped by this transitional era between old-world stability and modern chaos. Today, we are exploring the psychology of younger Gen X and why this generation became emotionally tougher, mentally skeptical, and socially different from almost every generation before and after them. Younger Gen X grew up in a psychological environment that was radically different from what came before and after them, because they experienced a childhood filled with physical reality, face-to-face interactions, and slower communication, but entered adulthood during one of the fastest technological and cultural transformations in human history. They remember a world before smartphones, before social media, before endless notifications, before digital surveillance, and before people built identities around online validation, which means their brains developed under completely different emotional conditions compared to younger generations. As children, boredom was normal, privacy still existed, and social interactions happened physically rather than digitally, which helped many younger Gen X individuals develop stronger internal worlds, better emotional patience, and higher tolerance for solitude. But then everything changed. Suddenly the internet arrived, workplaces transformed, communication accelerated, and social expectations shifted almost overnight, forcing younger Gen X to psychologically adapt faster than many people realize. This created a unique mental duality where they often understand both old-school values and modern systems, but fully belong to neither. Too young to benefit from the economic stability older generations experienced, but too old to grow up digitally fluent like millennials and Gen Z. Younger Gen X became the emotional bridge generation, carrying stress from both directions. One of the strongest psychological traits associated with younger Gen X is emotional independence. And much of that comes from the cultural environment they were raised in during childhood and adolescence. Many younger Gen X individuals grew up during an era when parents were increasingly busy, divorce rates were rising, dual-income households became common, and children were often expected to manage themselves emotionally with minimal supervision. This was the era of latchkey kids, where millions of children came home to empty houses, made their own snacks, solved their own problems, and learned very early that emotional self-sufficiency was not optional but necessary. And while this independence created resilience, it also shaped their emotional wiring in subtle ways. Younger Gen X often learned to suppress vulnerability because asking for help was sometimes viewed as weakness, inconvenience, or emotional dependency. As adults, this can create people who appear highly competent and calm externally, while internally carrying stress, anxiety, or loneliness they rarely express openly. Psychologically, this generation became skilled at functioning under pressure without drawing attention to their emotional struggles. which is why many younger Gen X individuals are seen as reliable during crises, but emotionally difficult to truly understand. They learned survival before self-expression. And because they were raised during periods of economic uncertainty, political distrust, and shifting social norms, many developed a skeptical worldview where trust must be earned rather than automatically given. Younger Gen X is often described as cynical, sarcastic, detached, or emotionally skeptical, but psychologically this attitude did not appear randomly. This generation witnessed repeated institutional disappointments during formative years, including corporate layoffs, political scandals, rising economic instability, cultural commercialization, and the growing realization that hard work alone no longer guaranteed security. Unlike older generations who were raised with stronger belief in institutions, younger Gen X entered adulthood during a period where trust in systems was rapidly declining. And unlike younger generations who openly discuss mental health and social frustrations online, younger Gen X often internalized disappointment privately through humor, sarcasm, emotional distance, or quiet disengagement. This explains why many younger Gen X adults value authenticity so intensely and quickly lose respect for manipulation, fake positivity, or corporate language. Their skepticism became a defense mechanism against repeated disillusionment. Psychologically, sarcasm became emotional armor. Humor became emotional regulation, and emotional distance became protection from disappointment. This generation often sees through social performance faster than others because they spent decades watching institutions constantly reinvent narratives while everyday people absorb the consequences. One of the least discussed psychological realities of younger Gen X is exhaustion. Not just physical exhaustion, but emotional exhaustion from decades of constant adaptation. This generation has repeatedly been expected to reinvent itself every few years just to remain economically and socially relevant. They adapted from analog systems to digital systems, from stable careers to unstable job markets, from privacy to social media exposure, and from traditional communities to increasingly fragmented modern lifestyles. And unlike younger generations who grew up expecting rapid change, younger Gen X had to psychologically absorb these transitions in real time while simultaneously building careers, raising families, and managing adult responsibilities. That creates chronic cognitive fatigue. Many younger Gen X individuals feel emotionally tired not because they are weak, but because they have spent decades continuously recalibrating themselves to survive shifting realities. And because they were taught to just deal with it. Many suppress burnout until it quietly affects relationships, health, motivation, and emotional connection. This generation often carries invisible stress because they became experts at appearing functional even when mentally overloaded. Because younger Gen X spent so much of life navigating social and institutional change, many developed an unusually strong radar for authenticity. They tend to respect people who are direct, honest, self-aware, and emotionally real rather than performative, exaggerated, or attention-seeking. This may explain why younger Gen X often dislikes superficial branding culture, excessive self-promotion, or emotionally manipulative online behavior. Psychologically, they associate authenticity with emotional safety because they grew up during eras of rapid media expansion where marketing, corporate messaging, and public image became increasingly artificial. As a result, many younger Gen X adults value depth over image, competence over hype, and genuine connection over social performance. They often prefer smaller trusted circles rather than large social visibility because emotional trust matters more to them than public attention. And although this generation may appear emotionally reserved, many possess deep emotional intelligence, developed through years of observing human behavior rather than constantly broadcasting themselves online. Their emotional style is quieter, but often more psychologically observant. Despite being overlooked in cultural conversations, younger Gen X may actually possess one of the most psychologically adaptive mindsets of any modern generation. They learned how to survive uncertainty before uncertainty became normal. They learned emotional resilience before self-help culture became mainstream. They learned how to function without constant validation, and they developed flexibility in environments that continuously changed the rules. But that resilience came with a hidden cost. Many younger Gen X individuals became so focused on surviving that they forgot to prioritize themselves emotionally. And now, as this generation moves deeper into middle adulthood, many are beginning to reevaluate identity, meaning, emotional fulfillment, and personal peace in ways they postponed for decades. Psychologically, younger Gen X represents a generation that mastered adaptation, but is only now learning the importance of emotional restoration. And perhaps that is the true story of younger Gen X. Not weakness, not cynicism, not detachment, but survival during one of the fastest societal transitions in modern history. So, do you think younger Gen X became emotionally stronger because of the world they grew up in? Or emotionally exhausted from constantly adapting to change? And if you were born between 1973 and 1980, how much of this psychology felt personally familiar to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Mind Science Simplified for more deep dives into psychology, human behavior, generational thinking, and the hidden patterns shaping modern life. Because understanding people begins with understanding the forces that shape them.